Well, let's get started. Good morning, everyone. I'm Alex Zablocki, the Executive Director of the Jamaica Bay-Rockaways Parks Conservancy, and I would like to welcome you to the 15th Annual Shorebird Festival at Jamaica Bay, along with our partners, the American Littoral Society, New York City Audubon, National Park Service, and all of our guests joining us virtually from around New York City and really around the world. I'm being assisted this morning by Emma McCauley of JBRPC, Alexandra Kononik of the American Littoral Society, and Danielle Sherman of New York City Audubon, who will both be in the comments section with you today. So if you need anything, just send them a message there. If you would like to ask a question to a panelist, use the Q&A function in the chat within Zoom. With that housekeeping out of the way, I want to thank you all for joining us this morning virtually. I hope everyone is staying healthy and safe during this time. While our parks remain open and busier than ever and welcome visitors while practicing social distancing, public programs and events like this that can draw well over 100 people have continued online. We wish we could be out in Jamaica Bay with you this year, where the Shorebird Festival was started 15 years ago. But the show must go on, and we'd like to play a short video for you now, produced with Don Riepe from the American Littoral Society, to give you a feel for what our festival is like in person.
Hi, I'm Don Riepe, and it's the annual Shorebird Festival. And right now we're heading off to the south end of the East Pond.
Mom, I'm seeing a bird. Oh, look!
So the reason we're having a Shorebird Festival is that of all the groups of birds, shorebirds are pretty much the most difficult to identify. That's why the birders like them. Also, they fly amazing distances. One bird in particular, the red knot, will leave here, fly non-stop to Brazil, and then south to Tierra del Fuego to spend the winter. Thousands of miles, several days non-stop flights. And when they come back in the spring, they're more colorful. And that's the time when the horseshoe crabs come up too. So they feed voraciously on the horseshoe crab eggs because they've lost so much of their body fat, i.e. fuel. So they have to build that up again because they're going up to their Arctic breeding grounds. Right. So the importance of these refuges along the coast are stopover places. They don't breed here, they don't winter here, but they stop here and fuel. It's like a big gas station or supermarket.
The Shorebird Festival is a really terrific partnership of New York City Audubon and the American Littoral Society and the National Park Service Gateway National Recreation Area. These are birds of the coast, and the coasts are an important focus for conservation right now around the world and in North America in particular.
Birders like shorebirds because they're very competitive. So birders like to have a challenge, for example, come and see a rare bird, or tell the difference between a western sandpiper and a semi-palmated sandpiper, which may be just a little bit of a bill size, or see another bird that's just a little slightly different looking. So it's not easy to identify some of these smaller peeps or shorebirds. And it's a real challenge, and that's what birders really like.
Juvenile semi-palmated sandpipers just came in here. Notice how beautifully crisp their back feathers are, neatly arranged because every feather came in at the same time. The adult semis have a mixture of breeding and non-breeding feathers, so they're messy. They're kind of, some are black, some are silver, some are brown. But you can see the juvenile semis, very, very beautiful scalloped look to their back feathers. Nice kind of ginger-colored fringes. That's how you age shorebirds this time of year. The juveniles look really fresh, the adults look kind of messy and worn. Who goes up? the lesser yellowleg. I've seen at Jamaica Bay, I've seen 30 species in a day. That's very rare, typically 20. My favorite, buff-breasted sandpiper, may not be here today. Just had a beautiful white rump. 40 years I've been doing this, I learn something new every day, and I get a new appreciation every day, and it never wanes. And I got bored with everything I've ever done in my life other than wildlife photography and looking at birds. They will lift you from bad spirits and bring you back to where you feel pretty good. And then before you have to go back and face what you consider to be reality, because this is reality.
Question from the young lady over here.
What is the biggest bird that's here?
The biggest bird here is that mute swan way down there. It's heavy, weighs maybe 15 pounds or more. The tallest bird is the great blue heron, which is hunting over there on the other side.
It's so much different hearing about the environment, you know, learning about wildlife from a book or from TV or from the internet. When you get kids out here, it's a completely different experience. Hearing the sounds, feeling the breeze, you know, seeing the plants around you, being able to reach out and touch stuff, you will never get that from a book or from a screen.
So I didn't have binoculars and I couldn't really see any of the birds. And this woman, she focused on this bird that was like really far away that like nobody could see without binoculars at all. Like they wouldn't even know a bird was there. And then she said, "Do you want to see it?" And I said, "Okay." So then I looked through it and I saw this bird had a kind of small body. It was like against all the really tall grass, like also a skinny beak, and it was completely white. And I thought it was really cool.
Jamaica Bay is by far the best place to see shorebirds in New York City because Jamaica Bay is a huge estuary located in Brooklyn and Queens. It's over 13,000 acres in size, and it's got a lot of mudflat that will attract the shorebirds. You don't find that in many other areas of New York City. We have great and snowy egrets on the shoreline just directly across here. The taller one is the great egret, and to the left is the snowy. Now, the great egret has a yellow bill, black feet, and the snowy has a black bill and yellow feet, and it's also smaller.
So the bird over to the right
Of
Go in the water.
at the far shoreline, American oystercatcher has
To the left of the...
a large yellow bill, but that's one shorebird we haven't seen on the other side.
I'm gonna go tell your mother.
It might be a yellow-crowned night heron.
Right on the good side
Yeah.
of the colors, right?
Yeah, I think it's a yellow-crowned night heron.
Yes, I've been looking for the black-crowned night heron and the yellow-crowned night heron.
So you're corroborating my sighting that this is a yellow-crowned night heron, right?
Yep.
Thank you.
Take that to the bank, probably.
What we see with shorebirds is a healthy coastline, healthy water, healthy birds. If the birds are healthy, the people are healthy.
The major threat to shorebirds here and worldwide is habitat loss. As more and more marshes are filled in or become polluted, combined with sea level rise, gradually covering all the mudflats more and more, threatens the future existence of many of these species.
I'm a true believer that people need nature. Nature makes people happy. Interacting with wildlife, with an animal, with a bird, you look at that bird and the bird looks back at you sometimes. There's nothing like it.
Welcome back, everyone. Nature does truly make us happy, and we have that video available on our website. And as a reminder, this will be recorded and posted later on. I know sometimes with Zoom, the video doesn't come in as clear as we would like, so you can view that video a little bit later. As many of you know, Jamaica Bay is a unique and fun place offering something for everyone, and it's just waiting to be explored. Emma McCauley is going to tell us a little bit about the Conservancy's Jamaica Bay Shorebird Story Map, which we've linked to in the comments. Emma, welcome.
Thanks, Alex. Hi, everyone. My name is Emma. I'm the Stewardship Data and Education Coordinator at the Jamaica Bay-Rockaway Parks Conservancy. And I just want to take a minute here to introduce you to a resource we developed in support of taking our Shorebird Festival online this year. So this digital tool that you're seeing now is called a story map. You may have checked it out earlier. We linked it on the event page, and also you received it in the resource page on the Eventbrite when you registered. But we designed this to help you have as much of an interactive park-based experience as possible, even though we're taking our festival online this year. So what you're seeing now is a map of Jamaica Bay and Rockaway Peninsula. This map has several different coded icons. Right now we're clicking on the plus signs, which have information about what our 4 organizations do to study and protect shorebirds, along with links to find out how you can get involved. These location marker icons on the map show birding hotspots around the bay and on the peninsula. They have really specific access instructions along with trail maps where relevant, so that you can take these resources and what you learned today and use them to inspire your own bird watching trip. Our final icon on this map is photos and videos of our local shorebirds to New York City. Many of them have been taken by Don Riepe himself, who you'll hear from shortly, along with recordings of the birds' unique calls. So scrolling down a little bit on our story map, we have more information about our 4 organizations: New York City Audubon, American Littoral Society, Jamaica Bay-Rockaways Parks Conservancy, and of course, Gateway National Recreation Area, along with links to our website so you can learn more about how you can get involved with our organizations. Here is that video that we just watched together, which recorded a previous year's festival. And then finally, we have a landing page with all of our links. So we hope that you'll use this resource along with everything you learned today from our presenters as inspiration to head out to Gateway yourself and do some birding on your own. Thanks, Alex.
Thank you, Emma. Next up, we have Don Riepe from the American Littoral Society, live from Jamaica Bay. He's our Jamaica Bay guardian and past host of this event, and he's joined by Tim Farrell of the National Park Service. They're going to give us a closer look at the shorebirds of Jamaica Bay. Good morning, Don. We're going to get audio on Don in a moment. I think Don is on mute.
Hi, Don and Tim, if you're listening. Yeah, Tim, could you help Don unmute himself, please?
Did. Oh, there you go. Hey. Good morning. Sorry about that. It's Don Riepe here with Tim Farrell of the National Park Service. We're standing on the edge of the south end of the east pond of the Jamaica Bay Refuge, which is a prime spot for migratory shorebirds this time of year. The east pond is lowered, so we create mud tide, which is around take to any, and sometimes we'll have thousands of birds with us. Today, we are accompanied by some least sandpipers, semi-palmated sandpipers, a couple of yellowlegs, and one short-billed dowitcher. So it's not a great day yet, but it's still time for many more to come in. So we're also accompanied by several birders who are here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to head out for a boat trip of the bay. See you out there. Hi, I'm Don Riepe, the Jamaica Bay Guardian for the American Littoral Society. We're here in Jamaica Bay. It's August, which is shorebird time in the bay. So thousands of shorebirds are migrating south. For us, it's midsummer. For them, it's the beginning of the fall migration. So during the year, you can see perhaps up to 40 species of shorebirds in Jamaica Bay. Most of them migrate. They come through in spring and fall. but some actually breed here, such as American oystercatcher, willet, and woodcock, which is actually a shorebird. So we're out by one of the big marshes in the bay. The tide is coming up, and that's the best time to see shorebirds. When the bay fills up with water and all the shoreline, which is mostly developed, covers up all the mudflats. So they come to the areas where they find some high ground. That's why the east and west ponds of the Jamaica Bay Refuge have always been a major attraction for shorebirds. But this year, because of the rain we've had, we may not have much mudflat over there. So we're out in the bay looking for them. Here's a nice bit of land out here on Ruffle Bar, and we're seeing a nice little flock of American oystercatchers. Now, most of the shorebirds migrate through the area, but oystercatchers actually nest here. So they show up in mid-March and they leave sometime in October, November. We're here in Joko Marsh, which is perhaps the biggest and best marsh in Jamaica Bay. It's approximately 200 acres of beautiful spartina grass with some high marsh, low marsh, and nice mud flats with chock full of mussels. So this is a great spot to see what Jamaica Bay was to a great deal many, many years ago, where we had many, many more acres of this beautiful marsh. So these marshes provide the habitat, the food resource, the shelter for the shorebirds, as well as the herons, egrets, ibis, and other species in the bay. But sometimes I'll see huge flocks of short-billed dowitches landing in the marsh, just any little high spot they find here. So it's a great place to see what Jamaica Bay was, and we hope that to some degree will be in the future as we continue our marsh restoration program. You see New York City skyline in the distance over there, Kennedy Airport on the eastern section of the bay, and lots of laughing gulls. Approximately 2,000 nesting pair of laughing gulls use this bay and these marshes out here each year. That's actually down from 7,500 nesting pair, which is creating a problem for the airport. beach in the Rockaways. And usually on a good day, especially in winter, there's the little flocks of sanderlings, a little wind-up toy shorebird that's running in and out of the surf. And I've seen them catch mole crab here in the surface area. Sometimes I also see the willets here, semi-palmated plovers like this beach as well, occasionally dunlin. But more often than not, the big numbers of birds I can see here, anytime from now on, would most likely be sanderlings. In some areas you might see a few piping plovers using the beach here. So it's a good spot for birding, and it's a good spot for shorebird. We have miles of beach here, stretching all the way from Lee's Park all the way out to the Tango freezing point tip.
Thank you, Don and Tim, for that amazing footage from Jamaica Bay and the Rockaway shoreline. Now we'd like to welcome tour leader, writer, and photographer Kevin Karlson, who's going to give us an introduction about shorebirds.
Hi everybody, Kevin Karlson here. It's good to see you all. I wish we were together in person at the Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge, but due to unforeseen circumstances, we can't meet this year. Don Riepe, Lloyd Spitalnik, and I started this festival many years ago, 14 or 15 years, and we've only missed 1 year so far, and that was because of Hurricane Irene quite a few years ago. But this year the COVID virus did it to us, so we're going to do things virtually. I'm sure you're getting used to that. First of all, I want to thank New York City Audubon for stepping in and putting this together. They stepped in several years back, and the American Littoral Society joined the American Littoral Society and really helped turn this festival around to a really successful event. And so what I'm going to do today is share a little bit about shorebirds with you, cover a little bit about my background in working in the Arctic with shorebirds, and then share with you the bird families, the shorebird families, and not identification, just appreciation, and let you know what the families are. I have a handful of videos, and we're going to hopefully have a little bit of fun in a virtual fashion. So thank you all for joining today, and let's hope that next year we can all come back together in person and make this a great festival again. Okay, see you guys soon. Bye. I want to start with a quote from Peter Matheson, author of a book called The Wind Birds. Peter was a naturalist who lived in the outer part of Long Island and one of the finest naturalist writers North America has ever had. The restlessness of shorebirds, their kinship with the distance and swift seasons, the wistful signal of their voices down the long coastlines of the world make them, for me, the most affecting of wild creatures. I think of them as birds of wind, as wind birds. In these next couple of images, you see, the first image, you see an important migratory stopover spot, which is up in Cordova, Alaska, where 4 million western sandpipers stop on their way to the tundra to breed. The next image shows some shorebird fans enjoying these birds from the edge of the mudflat. Next image shows Bolivar Flats in Texas, which is another important stopover and wintering spot for shorebirds. And the next, Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge. These stopover spots are crucial for shorebird success during their long migrations to their wintering grounds. Now I want to share with you a short video that I took on the Delaware Bayshore this past spring of the Delaware Bayshore phenomenon of red knots, ruddy turnstones, sanderlings, and semi-palmated sandpipers. Enjoy. Since I don't have much time today, I'm just going to share with you the different families in the shorebird order. Plovers and lapwings, oystercatchers, stilts and avocets, jacanas, sandpipers and allies, which are phalaropes, and thick-knees, which we won't be covering today. Northern jacana is an aquatic shorebird that lives in south of the U.S. border in Mexico and into the tropics, down as far as almost to Panama. And you can see them in the next image with their long toes walking on the lily pads. Oystercatchers. American oystercatcher, very familiar bird in the New York area. They nest in good numbers on Nickerson Beach and other beach spots. After they do their business, they lay their eggs of two to four eggs on a beach nest. And when the chicks hatch, the chicks are fully dependent on them for food for many months, unlike other shorebirds, which are stage 2 precocial and can feed themselves immediately and only need their parents to keep them warm until they get full feathers. The next image shows a teenager at about 4 to 5 months old still being fed and learning the art of feeding from the adult. Black oystercatcher is the counterpart of American oystercatcher. It lives on the rocky shorelines of the Pacific coast. Next image you see an American avocet, one of our most beautiful shorebirds. This is a bird from Salt Lake City, and the next one shows a couple of them down at Bolivar Flats in winter in Texas. Next, they're about the size of a laughing gull, as you can see from this image, and these birds are just going into breeding plumage. The flock at Bolivar has increased from about 8,000 to about 12,000 birds over the last 10 years, which is a good thing. And in winter, they look like these black and white birds with the beautiful wing pattern in the next image. Shown here is a male and female in flight. Black-necked stilt is the representative of the stilt family in the United States, in North America. And this is a male in this image, and the female with the dark bluish black back, and the female has a brownish back. They're frenetic shorebirds, very high-strung. Michael O'Brien refers to them as marsh poodles in our book, The Shorebird Guide. Now you see a juvenile, and now you see a male and female in flight. And I always love seeing a flock of black-necked stilts in flight. They're really streamlined and long-winged. Now we're going to cover plovers. Here you have a black-bellied plover, upper left, American golden plover, upper right, killdeer, lower right, and mountain plover, lower left. I'm going to show you a video here, quick video, of a killdeer feeding. They feed, all plovers feed like American robins. Start, stop, and tilt. If they feel something move with the sensitive soles of their feet, they know there's prey there, and they'll keep watching the ground for movement or for the dirt to move, and then they grab their prey. So enjoy. Now you see a Wilson's plover in one of my favorite photos of Wilson's. They like to stand near driftwood or vegetation to blend more in with the shoreline. These are strictly coastal birds, and you can see in the next image, look at the size of the eggs. I can't believe that female laid those eggs. They like to lay their eggs right at the tide line near some vegetation. Now you see piping plover. The 4 small plovers we have are about the size of sparrows. So piping plover and a couple of 2-day-old chicks in Cape May. And the next image shows a recently arrived piping plover in late March that came up on the coast of New Jersey and the Atlantic. They have an interesting feeding behavior where they patter the water with their feet to try to get the sand crabs to move, and in which case they'll see bubbles or they'll see movement in the sand at the tide line. Then they reach down and grab them. I have a short video that shows that, so enjoy. Since I'm pressed for time, I can't cover the other plovers, but we have 4 small plovers, 3 large plovers about the size of robins, maybe a little bigger, and 2 in between, killdeer and mountain plover. Now we're going to deal with sandpipers. 36 of the 49 species of nesting shorebirds in North America are sandpipers. They range from the largest long-billed curlew, from 23 to 26 inches long, including the bill, to the smallest least sandpiper, the smallest shorebird in the world at 4.5 inches. Some of my favorite sandpipers are Hudsonian godwit, sanderling, which you see here doing a aggression display on feeding on the beach, American woodcock, which is a woodland sandpiper, and buff-breasted sandpiper, my favorite bird in the world. I worked with them for 4 years in the Arctic. The next image shows a long-billed dowitcher on the left and a short-billed on the right, taken at Jamaica Bay. A tough quandary and ID that we've worked out. And then red knots, 2 beautiful, brilliant red knots, and a flock of red knots picking up on the Delaware Bay shore. The next group of birds here are the allies. This is the phalaropes. You can see the red phalarope female on the left and the male on the right. In this family of birds, the phalaropes, the females are dominant. They're the most beautiful plumaged, and they are the kind of the king or queen, the queen of the pair bond. They defend the pair bond. Next image shows redneck phalarope female on the left, the less vibrant male on the right, and the next Wilson's phalarope female on the left and the male on the right. We often see them at Jamaica Bay, not so much the red phalarope, but the Wilsons and the redneck, like these juvenile birds here. Juvenile red on the left, juvenile redneck center, juvenile Wilsons on the right. If you've never seen phalarope spinning, hang on to your hat. Here you're going to get a short video. Enjoy. What these phalaropes are actually doing is they're spinning around to create a vortex, which helps to draw prey up from beneath the surface of the water to the surface, which they then feed on. Okay, all good things must come to an end. We don't have much time. So I hope this fall you go out and look at some shorebirds on the coastlines, like these birds here on the Atlantic coast, or in the winter by the jetties where the purple sandpipers, sanderlings, and dunlin like to roost. Or when we get to travel again, go down south in the U.S. to see these black-necked stilts and long-billed dowitchers. Next spring, the beautiful shorebirds will be coming back, like these black-bellied plovers. And hopefully we can continue our migration efforts to make things easier for shorebirds, like New York City Audubon does so well for the future of our generations. And I hope to see you all next year at the J-Bay Shorebird Festival. Thank you.
Kevin, thank you for that presentation and your incredible photos and videos. Next up, we're pleased to have photographer Lloyd Spitalnik, who will share some bird photography tips and tricks.
I want to take a moment to remember my very close friend, Harry Moss. Harry passed away this past Memorial Day, and I miss him dearly. Harry, as past president of New York City Audubon, was a tremendous advocate for the safety of birds in the city, as well as nature. Rest in peace, Harry. I'm so happy you can join us. My name is Lloyd Spitalnik, for those of you who don't know me. I've been a birder for 30 plus years and a serious photographer of birds and other wildlife for the past 16. Today I'm going to talk to you about things you need to learn and how to apply them in the field. We only have a little bit of time, so I'm not going to be able to really delve into too much, but I'll give you as many tips as I possibly can. Thanks for coming. Now, one of the things you'll notice is that everything is basically at eye level. So that's one of the tips, but I want to start someplace else. First thing you need to do is learn the functions of your camera. And how do you do that? You read the manual and familiarize yourself with everything. It's very, very important. I can tell you that I used to run New York City Audubon Camera Club, and we'd go out in the field and people would ask me how to turn the camera on. As simple as that. So it really needs to be done. All right, the other two things in the camera is you need to set up your histogram and set up blinkies. Blinkies in the menus of your camera will say highlights. So in this bird, as an example, the whites could easily get blown out, and you would know that, and you'd be able to dial it down. So how many times have you been in the field and you see photographers and they take a picture or two and then they look at the back of their camera, and you think they're admiring their work, but in most cases, they're actually looking at those two things, blinkies and histogram. So they can make corrections on the exposure, and it's very, very important. So turn those two things on, make sure you have them. Okay. Exposure compensation is something that most people really have no idea about. When you look into your viewfinder, it's usually either at the bottom of the screen or on the side of the screen, and you have a little graph starting at -3 going to 0 and then +3, maybe reversed, I don't remember now. And what you're doing is if you're overexposed or underexposed, you have to move that to compensate for it. Another very important thing to learn. Okay. Now, as a birder for all these years, I've learned many things about behavior of birds. And what that does for me is it helps me anticipate what the bird is going to do next. How many times have you taken a picture of, let's say, a warbler, even though we're doing shorebirds today, and you line it up and you take it and it's already flown out of the screen. So I can anticipate where they're going to go, and I'm going to move my camera with them. Another thing you really have to learn. Be patient. That's the #1 thing. Bird photography is not an easy thing. I remember somebody came up to me and they said, well, what are you doing with that big lens? And I said, well, I'm a bird photographer. And they said, oh, how glamorous. And I said, it's anything but glamorous. So what I mean by that, there have been days where I've sat in one spot for 6 hours. And in that 6-hour time, maybe I had 10 minutes here, 10 minutes there. But if I wasn't there the whole time, I would have missed it all. So you really have to build up patience. By the way, this picture was taken at the festival 2 years ago. So just so you know. Always wait for the bird to turn its head to look at you, because it's more intimate when you see the bird's eyes. And you also want to wait for a glint in the eye if you can. It may not be a sunny day, but there's a glint right there. And again, right here. And that's just going to always make for a much, much better picture. Backgrounds are extremely important, almost as important as the bird or whatever subject you're looking at or trying to take a picture of. So you'll notice that I try to get as clean backgrounds as possible. And if I don't have clean backgrounds, then I try to get the backgrounds out of focus. Again, they call it creamy backgrounds. And you do that by, if your lens is an f2 or an f4, open it, close it, open it up to those, because that gives you that is, you may lose some focus. Like if the bird's not perfect, you'll get the head in focus, but it'll go to the tail and that will drop out. But the most important thing is head focus. Nobody really looks at the rest of the bird. They look at the eye of the bird and the head of the bird. Straighten your horizons, as you can see here. I am a cockeyed. I don't know what it is, but when I look through the screen, I think I'm doing perfect horizons. And when I come home, they're always tilted. And I'm not talking about just slightly tilted, I'm talking about tilted. So I fix that. I use Lightroom and I use Photoshop, but there's always a straightening thing in no matter what program you're going to use when you're processing your pictures. So straighten them out. You don't want a bird to be climbing uphill or downhill when it was perfectly level. Okay. Now, one of the things is also decide what your goals are. My goal was I wanted to be a professional photographer, and it took time to get my craft going the way I wanted it. But at the beginning, I made so many mistakes. I remember the first date that I got my first big lens, a 500 millimeter lens. And every picture I took was basically out of focus. And I called one of my good friends, who's also a pro photographer, and I said, hey, I'm not getting good pictures. Maybe I have a bad lens. And he said, go out tomorrow and do this. And basically what we're talking about is stabilizing. So if you're hand holding, move your elbows in like I'm doing and press the button, or squeeze the button. Don't press the button, because when you press, the camera moves. When you squeeze gently, it'll stay much more firm. Put the back of the camera up against your face. All these things. Now what this does is it creates a tripod. So learn how to do that. Now, if your goals are just to take snapshots, then you don't have to worry about anything. Just take your snapshots. So, which brings me to the next thing. JPEG versus RAW. This is an age-old argument that people have all the time. I always shoot in RAW. Why? Because when I shoot in RAW, I'm not losing any pixels of what I'm taking. And when I go into post-processing, again, Lightroom or Photoshop, I have much more latitude in what I can do in terms of correcting exposure, because you're not going to hit your exposure perfectly every time. I can absolutely guarantee you that. So when you take JPEGs, the camera is figuring out what the most important pixels are, and it's throwing a lot of them out. So you don't have the same latitude. If you're close to your exposure, it'll work fine. If you're off by a stop, you're dead in the water. So it's one extra step to shoot in JPEG, and that's just to convert the JPEG into a TIFF or a JPEG, whatever you want. If you're shooting JPEGs, another pro tip is change it. Once you're shooting the JPEG, change that JPEG into a TIFF, because TIFF is non-destructive. And when you finish doing your processing, then you can bring it right back to JPEG, and you'll get much better results. Okay, so every picture that you've seen today is primarily done at Jamaica Bay, the refuge itself. But I've been at Floyd Bennett Field, I've been at Reese Park, I've been at Fort Tilden, I've even gone across to not Breezy Point. I always have a mental block, the one in New Jersey. You'll figure that one out. But there's just numerous. Some of the pictures I've taken were at Cape May when I was shooting with Kevin, which we shoot a lot together. So that's the thing there. Now, the biggest thing is respect your subject. Don't run after birds. Don't trespass on private property. Don't make sudden movements. What I mean by that is when you're lifting your camera up to it gently, don't bring it up like that, because that's going to disturb the bird and they're probably going to move away. So those are tips. I promise you, if you practice and go out and shoot as much as you can, you're going to do fine if you follow these things. And everything I'm telling you doesn't have to be just about wildlife. It can be people pictures, landscapes, whatever you want to do. This all applies. So I'm coming up to the very end now. This is redneck phalarope, which was taken there. And now you see my email address. And I'll be more than happy to answer any questions you might have. I don't really want to talk about equipment because everybody's budget is different, but buy the best equipment you can, especially when it comes to lenses. And that's it.
Lloyd, thank you for your presentation and that beautiful tribute to Harry. As a reminder, we are monitoring the chat and Q&A function. And as someone was asking in our question and answer function, where might be a good place to view shorebirds over the next week? Well, Don Riepe was live from East Pond at the Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge. Gateway National Recreation is open for you to visit. Someone asked if you should go to Fort Tilden. Just know there's no parking at Fort Tilden, but it is accessible by bike, bus, and if you take New York City Ferry to Rockaway, there's a shuttle that ends at Reese, and you can get there as well. Next up is New York City Audubon Senior Conservation Biologist, Kaitlyn Parkins, and she is going to talk about the research New York City Audubon is doing with shorebirds here in Jamaica Bay. Kaitlyn, take it away.
Hey, thanks so much, Alex. So hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here. Today, I am going to be talking about New York City Audubon Conservation Team's research, specifically on semi-palmated sandpipers in Jamaica Bay, and where they go after this, and how Jamaica Bay fits into our sort of overall migratory routes for these birds. And I just want to thank the rest of the New York City Audubon Conservation Team, Deborah Kriensky, Amelia Taban, and Susan Elbin, for also working on this project. And so I want to take a moment first to sort of recognize just how unique New York City really is in terms of ecological research, right? So we're located right here in the, sort of middle of the east coast of the Atlantic corridor in one of the most developed stretches of land in the entire North American continent. People often think of this as sort of a mega city from DC all the way up through Boston, and here we are right in the middle of it. And, when you look at New York City, we've got an average population density of, I think, somewhere around 26,000 people per square mile, more than 8 million people total. And so New York City isn't just like a case study for urban ecology. A lot of urban ecologists actually do their research in areas that are less developed than New York City suburbs. So I call New York City super urban, and I think it's a really awesome case study to sort of study wildlife and how it coexists with humans, because it's just really an incredible situation. So here you can see all of Gateway National Recreation Area, which was established in 1972. And then if we zoom in on just Jamaica Bay, you can really see in this aerial view just how densely populated the area around Jamaica Bay is, and I believe there's about 1,200 acres remaining of original 16,000 acre wetland that used to be here. And again, just a reminder, if you have questions during this presentation, it's a little hard for me to monitor the Q&A and chat while I'm presenting, but definitely please do put your questions in the Q&A box, and we'll try to get to as many of them as possible at the end. So here we are, Jamaica Bay. We're surrounded by impervious surface. It's, there's a lot of management challenges here. Anything from just general disturbance, contamination, historical contamination, current contamination, like from combined sewage overflow. We're looking at marsh loss, we're looking at erosion, we're looking at potential management conflicts because Jamaica Bay, the National Recreation Area, is managed for human recreation. And so we want Jamaica Bay to be for people and for wildlife, and sometimes in certain areas there can be management conflicts, and then also just a lack of capacity. There's lots of agencies and organizations working here that are really strapped for staff time and money. And so there's all of these challenges facing this area. And that doesn't mean, though, that there's nothing here. We still have this incredible, bountiful amount of life in Jamaica Bay, from horseshoe crabs to monarch butterflies. You can go out and see these beautiful sunsets with New York City in the background. And we have lots and lots of shorebirds as well. And that's what, as New York City Audubon, a bird conservation organization, that's sort of our focus and what I'll focus on today. And so the driving questions for the scientists on our team have been, and we've been working on this for a while, is sort of, one, how does Jamaica Bay fit into these global migratory pathways that shorebirds are taking? So there are people who sort of think that just the straggler shorebirds end up here and they just go off to die somewhere because they're, these aren't the good birds. The good birds are in Delaware Bay, not up here in Jamaica Bay. And we sort of want to know how Jamaica Bay fits, and then also, are the resources available for migratory shorebirds in Jamaica Bay adequate? So is there enough food? Is there enough rest without disturbance? Are they able to complete their migration and reproduce afterwards? Because just because an animal is in a location doesn't necessarily mean that that location is good for it. There are things called ecological traps that can sometimes attract wildlife in and then end up not being adequate and actually causing, lack of reproductive success or even death. And these traps are not good for wildlife. So we want to make sure that Jamaica Bay is not an ecological trap for these birds. So we want to make sure they're getting what they need when they come through. And so we started picking away at some of these questions, particularly using the semi-palmated sandpiper as sort of a representative of the suite of shorebirds that migrate through. We chose the semi-palmated sandpiper because it is the most common shorebird that moves through Jamaica Bay. I looked on eBird, and it looks like we get sort of high counts of up to about 5,000 of these birds, an average flock size of about 500 birds, and we get some peaks in May and kind of the end of May, early June, and then we get much larger peaks in August. So there's more birds moving through in the fall in August than in the spring. And so the birds that are here in the spring are coming up mainly from South America, from Brazil, and they're racing north as fast as they can to establish their good, they want to get good breeding territories. So they're moving really fast. They're only here for a couple days trying to get what they need, get up, breed. And then when they come back, they sort of dilly-dally a little more and they come back a little slower. Females tend to leave first and move through, followed by the males and the juveniles, and they sort of linger a little bit more in the fall and then return back to South America again. And so we started sort of with the question, how does Jamaica Bay fit into global migratory pathways for these birds, particularly the eastern population? So there's a western population of semi-palmated sandpipers that are actually stable and doing fairly well, and an eastern population that are in decline, and scientists haven't quite figured out what's causing these declines, whether it's something on the breeding grounds, something during migration, something on the non-breeding grounds, or sort of a combination of many things that are affecting these birds. And so to do that, we used some migration tracking technology called nanotags. So the nanotag here in the picture on the bottom next to the pencil, that's what it looks like. It weighs about 0.67 grams. It's a radio tag, so it transmits every 10 seconds an individually coded little set of beeps. You can actually visualize this, and you can see it's 4 different size sort of sounds, and it transmits that over a frequency of 166.38 kilohertz. And each of these tags are individually coded, so you put a tag on a bird and you know what the code is, and it's that specific bird, so you can identify the individuals. It has a battery life of about 4 months, and to attach to the bird, we just clip a little patch of feathers on its back and then glue it with Gorilla Glue to the bird's back. And as the feathers grow back in, they push off the nanotag, and so it eventually just falls off the bird. And so this doesn't harm the bird. It's very, very lightweight, and we're very careful only to put these tags on birds that weigh enough, about 25 grams. You can't put a tag on a bird that weighs more than about 1% of its body weight, and so we're very careful to strictly stay within those recommended limits. And so radio tags, if anyone has done radio tracking of wildlife, you can imagine they put collars on animals, or they put other tags on animals, and you can go out with an antenna and a receiver set to 166.38 kilohertz, and you can kind of go like this, and you'll hear beeps, and you'll hear little clicks if a bird is nearby, and the receiver will actually turn those series of little clicks and kind of figure out which bird it is and give you a tag number. And so you can see if the bird is actually in the area. So we can put these tags out on birds, and we can go out in the refuge if we wanted to, and we could see which birds are still around or which ones have left. So that's pretty cool, but the real power of nanotags comes from their use with the MODIS network for wildlife tracking. This is a collaborative automated telemetry array. So researchers put these up all over these towers. There are 500, I think more than 500 of them right now in the Western Hemisphere. It's run by Bird Studies Canada, and the towers look like on the photo on the right. There's one in Jamaica Bay that you can go look at really close to the refuge if you want to take a look at what it looks like. And so these towers are up, they're maintained by different researchers, and it's all set to that 166 kilohertz frequency, and it picks up any nanotag that comes by. So any tower can pick up any nanotag set to that frequency, and it all goes into a collaborative database, which is actually available to the public. So if you go to modis.org, you can explore these data yourself. It picks up birds in flight about 10 to 15 kilometers out, and on the ground, however, so they're lower, it only picks up birds within about a kilometer from there. And so in our area, there are towers all over. There's 2 on Long Island. There's 2 in the New York City, immediately in New York City, one at the New York Aquarium on Coney Island, and one at the refuge, as well as a tower at Sandy Hook. So there are those towers, and then of course this array across the Western Hemisphere. More towers are being put up all of the time. And so this really harnesses the resources of all these different independent researchers who can each maintain a tower or 2 towers, or some maintain 50 towers, and it all goes together and allows us all to collaborate and collect data across the range of various species. So really, really cool technology. And so we went out over the course of several years and we put nano tags on semi-palmated sandpipers. So these are some pictures from a day in the field. This is what it looks like. This is at Sunset Cove Park in Broad Channel. We sort of set up with an umbrella. The shade is for the birds, not for the people. We use mist nets to catch the birds. This is Dr. Susan Elbin and Jose Ramirez Garofalo, who were helping extract a bird from the mist net. For birds that weigh enough, we will put a nano tag on their back, as seen on the photo on the right. And then we also band all the birds with really lightweight plastic flags like 4PN down here in the bottom left-hand corner. And then we set these birds off, we watch them, they fly away, go back to foraging, they go back to acting normal right away, and then we wait. So over the course of 2017 to 2019, we deployed 38 of these tags. They're pretty expensive. They cost about $200 a piece. So there is some limits to what we can do. And we went out mainly in the spring and banded these birds in the spring. We got detections back from 34 of the 38 birds. 3 of the 4 no detections birds were birds from 2019. One of the limits of this technology is that in order to get data back from the towers, they aren't constantly transmitting it to an online database. You actually have to go out, download data, and then upload it to the website. And so it's very possible that we have detections for these birds, but the researchers that maintain those towers haven't been able to get out to the tower and actually get the data. So sometimes we actually end up being months in the future and we get data from a bird from back 6 months ago because somebody finally downloaded their tower data. It's just a little bit of a limitation. And so here's an example of the data we get back. This is bird, so 28772. It was banded on May 29th by the only a couple of days later, it was up in Massachusetts at Amherst College, and then up at Rachel Carson National Wildlife Refuge. And then just a couple days after that, it was in Quebec, where it spent a couple of days. And then it went off the map, and I'll explain what that kind of means in terms of birds. So then it was gone. It wasn't detected again until July 22nd, where it stayed by the St. Lawrence River for a little while, the 29th, where it went to the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and then on the 30th, it hopped on down to Nova Scotia, and then it was gone and not detected again. So this is just sort of an example of the kind of data we get back on these birds. And so here are all of our 2017 and 18 tags, all of the northward migrations sort of on the same map. And you can see all the birds were banded in one spot in New York City, and then sort of just there's a starburst. So these birds are moving all over and moving up through. But you can see these birds are going to places that are known shorebird stopovers. And so places like the Bay of Fundy, the St. Lawrence River, James Bay, and also up to Lake Ontario. Now, what I said when I said, okay, these birds then go off the map, what does that mean? These towers need to be maintained by people. They need a power source like solar radiation. And so there are some limitations that cause that mean that there are really no towers up on the breeding grounds. So when these birds go off the map, they're going far enough north that there are no longer any towers that can detect them. And so what we hope and assume is that these birds are going up to their breeding grounds. We don't see them for a while. And then hopefully we pick them back up in the fall. And here's some fall data. So these birds are coming down back from the breeding grounds. We're picking them back up in some of these same places. And then they are jumping back off again. So I just want to take a look at some of these fall migration routes specifically, because our birds seem to follow specific pathways. So there are a lot of birds that go through the Bay of Fundy and Nova Scotia. So they come down from the Bay of Fundy, they go through Nova Scotia, and then they hop off the map and disappear. They don't go down along the coast of the US because if they did, there are towers there that would detect them. So these birds are likely jumping off of Nova Scotia and flying more than 2,000 miles pretty much straight down to their non-breeding grounds in South America. Another route are birds that move through Massachusetts. So this bird was banded on May 29th. We did see it briefly in in June up by the St. Lawrence River, and then it was off the map until about the 14th, and it was in Canada up in the 14th and 15th, but then it came back down through Rachel Carson National Wildlife Refuge, and then it hung out in August near Monomoy and Nantucket, which is on Cape Cod, essentially. So we've got a couple birds following this kind of pathway where they migrate down. They don't go to Nova Scotia, they go to Massachusetts and Cape Cod, and then they likely hop off. This was a really interesting bird that I enjoyed. Sorry, there are no lines on this map, but I can sort of explain it. This bird headed up north, but then when it came back down in mid-July, it came down through and followed that Massachusetts route, where it came down and was in Massachusetts in July 15th, and then down onto Cape Cod, and then it hopped off of Cape Cod. And the cool thing about this is we actually had a sighting of this bird, which was right in the middle on July 21st in Boston. And so a person saw this bird, took a photo of it and reported it, and that the 21st is right in the middle of the time where it would have been sort of up in Massachusetts and Vermont and Maine, and then it was down in back down on Cape Cod. So it was really cool to see the data from the MODIS towers and the sighting data actually match up. And a really interesting thing that I think is that this bird was actually at a known shorebird stopover, which is right outside of Boston, Boston Logan International Airport. And so this bird is not only using a really highly urbanized habitat on its way north when it stopped in New York City and got caught and abandoned, but it's doing the same thing in the south. So this bird is spending a lot of time in really urbanized habitats in these little patches, which is pretty cool. And so another one, this bird was in Wellfleet, Massachusetts, which is on Cape Cod, on the 29th of August, and then a couple days later, on September 2nd, it was in French Guiana. So that's about 2,700 miles in 5 days, which is an average of 41 kilometers an hour, which is a heck of a tailwind. And then it spent 12 days in French Guiana before very likely hopping off and moving on down to Brazil. So another really cool thing. Now, of course, we didn't detect it anywhere between Wellfleet and French Guiana, but there are no towers on some of the islands in, say, the Bahamas and that area. So it's very possible, or there are few, it's very possible that it did stop at some point and, you know, didn't just spend 5 days in flight or anything like that. But still, it was so exciting when we got this data back that one of our birds was in South America, and we could see it in sort of real time. So there was an average of about 6 days between banding and then detection at a station other than Jamaica Bay National Wildlife Refuge, which means that the birds are likely spending a little bit of time here and potentially finding the food that they need. And the shortest time between spring and fall detections was about 40 days, a mean of 51. And after talking with some experts, we sort of have been able to determine that that is enough time for these birds to go north, establish territories, successfully breed, and then move back south. You know, if the birds aren't successful in breeding, they're often leaving much earlier than that. And so given that they are off the map on the breeding grounds this long, there is the potential there for reproductive success. And so we'd like to learn more about that. And I think we're sort of waiting for some of the technology and other tag technologies to come up. There are tags coming down the line that will actually monitor a bird's like body rate, and you can see when the bird is moving and look at these patterns. And from that, we might be able to tell if the bird is actually, you know, has laid eggs, it's incubating, things like that. So hopefully one day we'll be able to afford that technology. And there's lots of variation in pathways taken by individual birds, sort of two main paths in the spring and the fall, but lots of individual variation. These birds are going to major staging sites, and so New York City is connected to these places. We're also contributing this data to data from about 15 other researchers doing the same thing to look at whether or not you can predict a stopover site that a bird will choose based on where it was before that. And so hopefully that paper will be coming down the line soon. And so the next steps, we really want to look more into habitat quality, reproductive success, extended tracking to see exactly how long they're staying in Jamaica Bay, looking at their diets and refueling rates, looking at blood metabolites to see if these birds are really getting what they need here. So lots and lots of questions left, lots of work to do. And finally, not to forget that we are still surrounded by lots of people. Jamaica Bay is a place for birds and a place for people. And so we really love doing community programs such as our festivals like this one, our horseshoe crab monitoring, and our horseshoe crab and shorebird educational programs. So on top of our research, we really enjoy going out in the community and getting people involved with these birds. And with that, I just want to thank a couple of people specifically, especially Pam Loring and Jose Ramirez Garofalo, who've been instrumental in helping with this research, and then all of these funders as well. So thank you, everyone, and I am going to stop sharing my screen and hopefully take some questions.
Kaitlyn, really fascinating research. Diane just asked if most of the birds are going through Delaware Bay on their way north and then stopping in Jamaica Bay, or is Jamaica Bay their main feeding point on their way north? And I think you touched on this. Jamaica Bay is an important place for these birds.
Yeah, I think Jamaica Bay is an important place. They are doing the same kind of research further south. So in reality, if we really want to know that, we'd have to go nanotag them down on their non-breeding grounds and then see where they hit. But you can actually look at all the towers in our area and look at all the tags and birds that come through. And we do occasionally get birds that were tagged in Delaware Bay, but not that many. So it seems like for a lot of these birds, Jamaica Bay might be their main stopover site.
Okay, and someone did ask, I guess, and you touched on this also in where towers are located down near the Caribbean. How could they donate? You touched on if funding was available, we might be able to expand this work. Can someone donate to this cause? Is it grant funded? And what might the cost be for a program like this?
Yeah, it is mainly grant funded. So we've gotten federal grants. And so I think one of the big things you can do, I mean, individual donors are super helpful, and New York City Audubon does rely on individual donors to fund our science programs. But really where we get a lot of money for programs like this, which can cost upwards of, $50,000 or more, advocating for federal funding towards bird protection and research is really critical. And so doing that work and contacting your legislators, I think, is a really important thing people can do to help.
That's great. We're going to move on. We'll get to more questions in the Q&A section, but I just want to be mindful for time. Kaitlyn, thank you so much for this presentation and your research.
Great. Thanks so much, Alex.
Okay, next up, for a different interpretation of piping plover migration, we're pleased to introduce a new puppet show put together by the staff at the Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge. Enjoy.
The perilous plight of the piping plover pilgrimage, a puppet performance. Come on, Peggy, rise and shine. Peggy, it's time to go. Today's the day.
But I was just starting to like it here.
You'll be back before you know it. It won't be safe here soon, what with the hurricanes blowing through. It's time to journey north.
And you never know. Maybe up there, you'll find your mate.
And so we set off. My mom, my dad, and about 6,000 others.
All right. It's time to get moving. Let's hear a roll call. Everyone sound off. Peggy?
Present.
Patrick?
Here.
Peter?
We were ready to begin our extraordinary journey north. We were heading towards our summering grounds, which were hundreds and hundreds of miles away. In order to get there, we had to fly night and day, and we couldn't even stop to sleep or eat. Good thing we spent all winter storing energy with that nutritious food. We had to travel through all types of weather, like this huge storm that none of us had ever seen before.
Everybody stay together. Follow my lead. Keep pushing through. We can do it. Remember your drills. We practice this.
No, help.
What was that?
That was a hurricane. We don't usually see them this soon. Oh, normally we see the city lights before the storms begin. Oh, that must have been worse than the one that Grandma used to tell us about.
Whew. That was a close one. Is everybody okay? Let's do another roll call. Percy.
Here.
Paula.
Here. I think I see the lights now. We're almost there.
Okay, Plovers, we're pulling into our first landing. Everybody stretch your wings and take a break while I survey the area. I'm going to need some helpers here.
I'll help.
Yeah, great. Now focus up. This is what we need. Steady food supply, a nice stretch of beach to raise our young, shelter from predators, and after everything we've been through, some peace and quiet.
This beach is huge. It must stretch on for miles. It can't be that hard to find what we need.
We'll pair off into teams. Peggy, Pedro work together. They're going west. And Padma, Paula, you can try further east.
Well, this has potential.
Yeah, and it looks like there's plenty of food, but watch out.
That was a close one. We better keep moving.
Now this place looks great. Plenty of space to raise young.
Is that a hawk? We need to get out. Fast.
Wait. I don't think that's a hawk. It's a kite.
Well, you could have fooled me. My mom always told me to run first and look later.
But it doesn't feel safe. Let's try somewhere else.
Hey, look over there. This might protect us from predators.
Okay, let's try it out.
A dog. Now that's a real predator. We've got to run.
Wow, that was so scary. That did not work. We have to try again.
Maybe we can try this place. No predators, no people. You hear that? It's so quiet.
That's a weird looking tumbleweed.
That's no tumbleweed. That's a plastic bag. Oh no, look. There's trash everywhere.
I don't want to live here.
Who would? At this rate, we'll never find a home.
But my grandma told me that I should never give up. If she could do it, so can I. There's got to be a place for us.
We came all this way. Let's keep on going.
This place is
perfect.
There's enough food, space to raise our young. These sand dunes will provide plenty of shelter. And all I can hear are the waves.
Yeah, we have to tell the others. Okay, nice to talk to you, Pete, but I've got to go. Penny needs my help around the nest. Ah! Okay, settle down. I have the most amazing story to tell you. It's about an extraordinary bird who conquered every obstacle that came her way because she wouldn't give up.
Oh, Pedro.
And so, we plovers passed a peaceful summer, planning to return promptly.
Kevin said earlier that shorebirds bring us joy, and I hope that brought you lots of joy. I want to thank the rangers and the staff at the Wildlife Refuge for putting that puppet show together. It was truly extraordinary. Now we'd like to share a message with you from our partners and newest neighbors in Jamaica Bay at Shirley Chisholm State Park at Gateway National Recreation Area in Brooklyn.
Hi, my name is Tiffany, and I'm an educator at Shirley Chisholm State Park. For the Jamaica Bay Shorebird Festival, we wanted to share some of the different spots around the park where shorebirds can be found. Within the short time our park has been open, we have watched many different species of birds visit the shoreline. Many shorebirds are migratory, meaning they spend time traveling from one place to another to find food or a safe place to nest. This year, we found oystercatcher nests on the shoreline and even had a killdeer lay their eggs on the trail leading to the fountain pier. Shorebirds tend to prefer habitats where there is open space, including shorelines, marshes, and grasslands. Our park has 407 acres of grassland with 3.5 miles of tidal shoreline along Jamaica Bay. The shoreline around our park is a mixture of mudflats, sand, rocks, and marsh grass habitats that provide food and safety to many shorebird species. Shorebirds come in a variety of colors and sizes. Some birds, like the American oystercatcher, stick out because they have black, white, and brown feathers and a bright reddish-orange beak. Others, like some plovers and willets, have light-colored or speckled feathers that help them camouflage against the sand. During low tide, the exposed shoreline and mudflats provide the perfect place for shorebirds to use their long legs and beaks to find food like crabs, clams, worms, and snails. The shore is not just the perfect place to find food, but many shorebirds also build nests and lay eggs right on the sandy shore in areas where the tide doesn't reach. At high tide, the mud and sand are covered, but the rock and grasses remain exposed. The interior of Shirley Chisholm State Park is a mixture of open grassland with a scattering of trees and shrubs. As a reclaimed landscape, the park was purposely planted with over 35,000 native trees, shrubs, and grassland plants. While most shorebirds prefer open spaces, some species like killdeer and American woodcocks do spend time in the tall grasses and even on our gravel trails. Every habitat shown in this video is important for shorebird species. With over 10 miles of hiking and biking trails, our park provides many viewpoints to observe these birds in their natural habitat. Always make sure to watch the birds from a safe distance and remember to keep an eye out for nests if you're ever walking along the water access areas. Thank you for spending some time with us down on the shore today. The Shirley Chisholm State Park staff and I hope to see you soon.
Thank you, State Parks. Our friends at New York City Parks are going to teach us a little bit about how to share the shore with beach nesting birds. Even though this video was originally recorded for New York City Audubon's Tern Festival last month, the information is just as important for protecting our shorebirds. Enjoy.
Hello, and welcome to beautiful Rockaway Beach. I am Sunny Correa from the New York City Parks Wildlife Unit. Our unit promotes coexistence between people and urban wildlife. Our work involves research, management, educational outreach, and policy recommendations. I'm here in Rockaway at the site of one of our management projects, the Rockaway Beach Endangered Species Nesting Area. Since 1996, New York City Parks has been protecting endangered shorebirds that nest on the south side of the Rockaway Peninsula. Several threatened and endangered species use this area as a breeding ground each summer. Today we are celebrating the terns, but joining the least in common terns nesting here are also piping plovers, American oystercatchers, and black skimmers. Already today you have learned lots about terns. You may be asking yourself, what can I do to help? Well, I'm so glad you asked, because now it's your turn to support shorebirds all over the city. I will be sharing 5 simple coexistence tips, which I hope you will undertake and share with your family and friends. Number 1, share the beach. New York City has over 14 miles of beaches to enjoy. In Rockaway alone, New York City Parks cares for over 6 miles of publicly accessible beach. If you are walking along a New York City beach or shoreline, you may come across areas that are fenced off or temporarily closed. Here at Rockaway Beach, approximately 1 mile is fenced off for nesting shorebirds each summer. This way, chicks can have access to the shore to feed and do not have to worry about avoiding people or the vehicles used in beach operations. We use symbolic fencing at our site in Rockaway. Brightly colored string and flagging with signs is used to notify visitors when they are approaching a protected shorebird nesting area. You will find similar signage in other protected breeding areas. Please respect these sensitive habitats along the shores of New York City and choose to use other areas of the beach. Not only will you be protecting the birds, but you'll also spare yourself some trouble as well. Remember those terns? They are very protective and territorial during the breeding season. This is the view our monitoring team experiences on the few occasions when they have to walk into the middle of the Rockaway breeding site. Terns are colonial nesters that lay their eggs directly on the sand. By nesting in large numbers, adults assist each other in watching out for threats. They will mob and fly after anything they perceive as a threat. Other birds, mammal predators, and even people, so watch out! Not only will they dive at you, they may also try to poop on you, the ultimate predator deterrent. Who wants to get pooped on? Number 2, observe and enjoy all shorebirds from a distance. This is a good general guideline when out anywhere on the beach. During this time of year, adults are working extra hard to raise and protect their chicks. So lend them a hand by observing from afar to avoid adding extra stress to their day. Give them space as you would any other New Yorker. Number 3, help keep the beach clean. Food or garbage left out on the beach attracts predators such as rats, cats, raccoons, and gulls. We don't want to attract them into an active breeding area. Garbage items can also be a physical hazard for birds, as it can be mistaken for food. Animals can also become entangled in it. So, the next time you visit the beach, make a pledge to leave it cleaner than you found it. On your way out, pick up a few pieces of litter the wind or tide may have carried in. Challenge your friends to do this too. You can also protect the beach at home by keeping your neighborhood clean. Litter left on the street can potentially be washed out to the ocean through storm drains during rainstorms. Number 4, keep dogs leashed and follow local regulations. Rockaway Beach prohibits dogs on the beach and boardwalk Memorial Day weekend to October 1st. Check your local beach to learn the regulations. In New York City, visit the Parks Department's website to learn more. Terns and other endangered shorebirds view even the most friendly of dogs as predators, which may cause them to abandon their nests. Number 5, keep kites at least 200 meters away from breeding shorebirds. 200 meters is equivalent to a little over 4 New York City street blocks. The nesting adults may see a flying kite as an aerial predator. They might seek out this potential threat, leaving eggs or chicks momentarily unguarded, or abandon their nest altogether. So just be aware of your surroundings before setting out with your kite. That's it. These coexistence tips are simple adjustments we can do to change our behavior. Oh, and one more important tip. Number 6, share your knowledge with friends and family. Everyone can do their part. You can learn more about the urban wildlife living in New York City by visiting the Wildlife NYC website. There, I encourage you to take the online pledge to coexist with all New York City wildlife and become urban wildlife ambassadors yourself. Thank you for watching and doing your part to support the birds. Now it's your turn. You got this.
This was a lot of fun. Thank you all for joining us today for the 15th Annual Shorebird Festival at Jamaica Bay. I don't think the festival's founders could have imagined this is what it would have been like so many years later. We're so grateful to all of our partners and to all of you for joining us to celebrate shorebirds. We hope to see you next year at Jamaica Bay. Please stay safe, everyone.